Hello viewers. Few years ago, there were certain situations in our country, situations which shook the entire nation, situations which made people look stunned. And on the other side, there was one person who actually was behind the complete process of unraveling the aspects that led to those situations. And that person, even today, is considered to be the hero of his times. And that person has been honored with Padma Bhushan by the government of India, NAF. And he is none other than the former Comptroller and Auditor General of India. And he's not just an accountant, Mr. Vinod Rai. And he is our special guest today. Mr. Rai, welcome to our Candid Conversations.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's indeed a privilege. It's been a long time. I've been waiting for this moment. And today it has happened. Thanks for your time. And most importantly, congratulations for being awarded the Padma Bhushan, sir. How would you look at this honor, sir? What do you think are those aspects in your entire career which perhaps must have motivated the government of India to honor you with Padma Bhushan?
See, it's not for any award or any recognition of that sort that one works in a career. In a career of, say, 45 years, there are any number of instances, any number of results, any number of aspirations that one goes through. And one keeps working just to satisfy one's own conscience, just to satisfy one's own aspirations, and try to achieve certain objectives that one places before oneself. Now, I don't think that any one particular aspect motivated government, but I think with due humility, I must accept that government has recognized all my efforts, and I think I'm very grateful to government for that.
In your 45 years, almost 45 years of career, you've been in various sectors, say the defense, say the financial sector, and also you've been the CAG. Can you please explain any outstanding or a memorable moment which you want to share with us?
See, that's the beauty of the civil service. The beauty of the civil service is, though quite often we are called generalists, but the beauty of the civil service is that it trains you so intensely to be able to work in any kind of environment, to work in any kind of a area, a sector where you do not have that domain experience, but at the same time, with the kind of experience that you bring upon, with the kind of awareness that you bring upon the job, or the kind of decision-making capability or dynamism that you bring, you're trained to ensure that delivery takes place in these kind of things. So I don't think there is any one memorable moment, but I think if you have to scale a summit somewhere,
yes,
you set up base camp. And I think my base camp was in Kerala, where, though I don't belong to the state, but I went to Kerala in 1974. And I think my seniors, my ministers, the chief ministers there, we got such good treatment, such good facilities, and a total open environment where we could perform. And there was no checks and balances on us of unmotivating kind.
And you explained about how you actually worked. So it is clearly understood that in your long career of 45 years, you must have confronted with legislature, with the executive. How do you look at this confrontation, sir? Because certain times things might be going parallelly, certain times you might look at it as an obstruction. How do you analyze this piece?
No, I don't think it will be fair to call it either an obstruction or a confrontation.
Okay.
See, in a parliamentary democracy, let's accept the fact that the elected representative is supreme. The political executive is supreme because it's a political executive which is answerable to the public. The public elects him, makes him the representative of the people. He goes to either the legislative assembly or the parliament. Then government is constituted. There's a council of ministers. Yes. So ultimate answerability is of these people. The accountability is of these people. Then there is, of course, the bureaucracy of the civil service, of the administration, which is supposed to carry out the policy initiatives that any elected government undertakes. So to a large extent, you will never find that there is a same wavelength among disparate group of people. But the question and the issue is always this, that you must have the objectives clear. You must ensure that you are transparent in your dealings, and the fact that there is sincerity and dedication in whatever you do. Once you do that, then obstructions do come, confrontations do come. These are from different sectors of society. But I think the success lies in ensuring that there is consensus building. You create a team. You either be a part of the team or you lead the team, and ensure that with that consensus building you take the initiatives. forward.
And when we talk about the civil services space itself, I mean, generations after generations, officers are coming. Like, what change have you observed, in all these years in the complete civil services officers' style of working? I mean, are they strict? Are they tightening the grip, or are they becoming fragile and then under the influence of the political parties or the politicians who actually, you people have to work with? How are you looking at these changes in the civil services system?
See, much has been said about the fact that the so-called, steel frame, which was the civil service, the steel frame is somewhere coming apart. I don't think that's very correct. See, what's happened is models of governance change, environments change. We are getting accustomed to coalition forms of government. There will be obviously different interests pulling in different directions. So in that, the bureaucracy also gets pulled in different directions. But the entire training of the bureaucracy is that you have to bring about synergy. You have to ensure that the different forces which are pulling in different directions, you try and build synergy among them and guide them or channelize those energies in a particular direction. Yes, there have been instances, unfortunately, where things have not come out in good light, but I think the bulk of the delivery system through the administration has performed very well, and I think that's the secret of the civil service.
But do you think it is actually strengthening the civil services space right now? So the young officers who are coming?
I sincerely believe, and I see a lot of green shoots. In fact, I'm very bullish about the fact that the civil service is once again beginning to deliver.
That's great.
And the good thing that is happening is that the younger elements in the civil service are beginning to question decisions which they think are not in the right perspective. I think that's a very good thing to happen. Now, if I'm given an instruction by my minister and I have certain hesitations about that, I should have the freedom to go up and explain to my minister and say, look, these are my hesitations about it, or these are my reservations. The ultimate decision-making power is always that of the minister, but the onus of taking that decision should also vest with him. So if I find that that decision is in some ways questionable, I would certainly ask him to write it down and give it to me.
But there is an aspect. Now, when you say this, now, ultimate decision lies with the minister because he's the public elected representative. Let's come back to your book. I mean, it's one of the explosive books, as many people say that. In your book, you've mentioned that, in fact, you've stunned the world when you said that certain politicians came to you when you were the Comptroller and Auditor General to do something or to... I mean, there are certain aspects which you mentioned, which directly or indirectly, it appears that these people have actually involved with the work which you actually were doing. In such a scenario, what exactly should be the space? Is this is a situation this will be continuing in the future too?
No, see, I told you there are people with different interests. There are people with vested interests. There are people with political interests.
Yes.
Their job is to carry their interest forward. But what is my responsibility? My responsibility is that I have an oath of allegiance administered to me by nobody less than the President of India, an oath of allegiance to take the constitutional mandate forward. Now, I have to ensure that that mandate I carry forward without fear of favor, without being partial to any side. So it's okay. It's their right to come forward and make their representation to me. May be fair, may not be fair. But then I have to ensure that the oath of allegiance which I have taken, I carry that.
In your book, not just an accountant, you mentioned about the transparency, you mentioned about the accountability in various chapters. You in fact emphasized on this accountability completely. How are you looking at this accountability factor in currently? Is it changing in the current form of governance which the current government is actually taking place?
See, I don't ascribe it to any government or anything else, but if you will all recall, and I think that's why I say I see green shoots in this country,
yes.
Because I think what we call Gen Next or Gen Y, younger generation, of people are very discerning, very demanding, very aware kind of people. Call it the age of the internet, call it the age of the television or the media, but these are people who are very aware of what is happening around them.
Yes.
And these people have debunked one very important myth in this country, which is the myth of the silent majority.
Okay.
Now, this is that majority which is coming forward and wanting to speak up. So, if they see anything wrong happening, they are willing to speak up and talk about it.
Right.
which I think is a very healthy development in our society.
As a Comptroller and Auditor General of India, I just want to talk about the tenure, because that is one moment, a sensational tenure which we can say. And that time you were actually scrutinizing the government's performance, or rather on various departments, how exactly they are performing. Well, I'm not trying to evoke the facts exactly, but then with respect to the transparency then and now, apart from the methodologies which the current government is adopting, especially related to the 2G spectrum or the coal block allocations, the spectrum allocations, are you seeing some sort of change? Are you actually expecting this sort of change when you were the CAG?
You see, that's what I said. From 2010 onwards, if you notice, after some certain amount of churning that went up in civil society, what was that churning all about? People were holding the government accountable and responsible.
Yes.
People were saying that, look, you are acting on our behalf. Please tell us what were the motivations for your doing whatever you were doing.
Right.
So that was the public, that was the younger generation, which I think was holding the government accountable, wanting them to be transparent, and wanting them to indicate all that has been done, how it had been done, so that the test of scrutiny is passed. And I think it has been a very good change in our society, because going forward, not only governments, anybody, even in a corporate enterprise, somebody taking a decision should be held accountable for that decision, and he should be able to explain why he took that decision.
Yes.
Which I think is happening. For example, if you hold an auction,
Yes.
it's a public auction, whether it's an e-auction or whatever kind of auction, no allegations are raised against you.
Absolutely.
It's an open and transparent, So I think going forward, it's a very healthy trend that I see coming in the working of not only the government, or working of any corporate sector, maybe a NGO, maybe a citizen-centric group, or whatever it is, that people are saying that, look, be transparent in your dealings, let the world know how you've done what you've done, and be accountable for it also. I think that's a very healthy development.
Should it necessarily be the auctions if we talk about transparency when we sort of deal with spectrum and the coal block allocations, or did?
Certainly not. Auctions is not the panacea for everything.
Absolutely.
Whatever action you take, let that action be such that it can stand or withstand the test of scrutiny.
Right.
All that I'm saying is, suppose it's a process in which normally, in government, the normal terminology is you send out bids, you choose L1 or L2, you remember?
Yes.
Okay. Now, suppose I'm not going for L1.
True.
For reasons to be recorded in writing, why I'm choosing L2 in preference to L1. If I record it down, nobody is going to question me on it, because I have taken a decision that, okay, L1 does not suit me for XYZ reasons. I'm recording those XYZ reasons. I'm going for L2. And there are any number of people within the government, maybe internal auditors, maybe finance people, who will justify the decision as being correct. And we go forward.
And when you were the Comptroller and Auditor General, sir, there was criticism you must have seen that people have gone to an extent to say that you are going overboard. The Comptroller and Auditor General is going overboard, and in actually making the reports, they in fact actually went, PAC, the Public Account Committee Chairman, actually went to an extent to say that the CAG is crossing the Lakshman Rekha. They should know the Lakshman Rekha. What do you think is the Lakshman Rekha for CAG, sir?
See, there is no such Lakshman Rekha for anybody. This is a trend. You are in the media space. Media is being told that 24/7 media keeps crossing the Lakshman Rekha every other time. People are saying that there has been judicial activism.
Yes.
There is media activism, isn't it?
Yes.
So there's a time when everybody has started questioning everybody else.
Yes.
And as far as the CAG is concerned, the mandate is very clearly laid down. We conduct 3 types of audit: financial audit, compliance audit, and performance audit. Now, performance audit is something which is of more recent origin, maybe about 20 years, maybe 25 years,
Yes.
whereas the other 2 audits are 50, 60 years old. And performance audit tends to question the quality of decision making, whether it's been efficient, whether it's been economical, whether it's been effective, and that's why some judgmental factors come in. That's about all.
And even the then JPC chairman, he actually said that an autonomous body like CAG, you're doing your work. Now, but then he went to an extent to say that the CAG should restrain from reporting national losses Rather, they should restrict themselves to report the financial impropriety. What do you say about this?
See, one very important element in auditing is, and performance auditing, the guidelines have been very stringently laid down. Okay. It's a guideline which is not of our creation in India alone. These are global guidelines, and we follow global patterns. And in that, one very clear guideline is that in case the auditor feels that there has been shortfall of revenues realized by government, by any act of implementation of any policy, the auditor is obliged to point out the extent of shortfall. And if you'll recall and see some of our reports on tax revenues. Every year we say direct tax, indirect tax, excise, VAT, whatever it may be, that there has been shortfall, loss of in assessment, and government makes good those losses. Makes good those losses when we point it out and gives us a confirmatory report to that extent, But maybe this particular amount turned out to be a large amount. It's the first time that it was hitting public space. That's why I think there were reactions of very different kinds.
But from the political spaces, sir, even there are arguments, there are statements that can actually come, saying that autonomous bodies like CAG, or for that matter the Election Commission as well, should be accountable to the Parliament of India rather than the Constitution. What do you have to say about this, sir?
See, I don't think I want to render an opinion on that. We are a creation of the Constitution. Makers of the Constitution, whichever way they align any one of these agencies, I think those agencies or these institutions should be willing to work. There are countries where the nominee or selection is cleared by committee of the Parliament also. But nowhere is the Auditor General made subordinate to the Parliament. In most democracies, most geographies around the world, he is independent. And he's been made independent for the simple reason that all the time, you see, by definition, the auditor is a contrarian role he has to play, and he is questioning government. So I think the creation in the Constitution is such that he's been given an independence to be able to question government and place his findings before Parliament.
During your tenure as the CAG, sir, you've submitted so many reports, audit reports, and those reports which actually have created sensation and then during those times. Where exactly you found this fault lines? Is it at what level do you find this fault lines? Who should be held responsible for those loopholes or fault lines?
See, I don't think any one person or any two persons can be held responsible for these kind of faults that have occurred.
But the entire system can't also be held responsible.
No, it's not. But there were systemic deficiencies. There was a fragility in the decision-making process. And that is why, whether it was Spectrum case where these issues could probably have gone to the Council of Ministers to take a decision, which is what the Law Ministry and the Finance and the Prime Minister were advising, but it did not go to the Council of Ministers. The decision got taken at a certain ministerial level itself. Or any other of the other things. In the Commonwealth Games, what did we see? That there was no coordinating agency because 19 different agencies were working for the Games. But which was the agency which was coordinating the efforts of all these to ensure that there was timely delivery of whatever it was? So the issues, the patterns, the models of governance differ from place to place. So the fragility creeps into the system the moment there is opacity in the decision-making process.
But someone could have avoided, could have stopped these things happening, right? So someone could actually be held responsible for this.
Yeah, I mean, these could have certainly been stopped.
Yes.
And for each one of these, there were agencies or personalities at different levels which could have stopped them. That is why I said the models of governance, leadership issues, guidance issues were the issues because of which these failings came about. And
if you completely look at this, the Comptroller and Auditor General, the scrutiny of all these things we've been scrutinizing, is it adequate, sir, in the current system of governance? Is it adequate, or you see there must be some sort of changes that have to be brought in?
No, I would sincerely feel that the mandate of the Auditor General as enshrined in the Constitution of the country seems to be adequate.
Okay.
I would not say that you need more powers or punitive powers or anything like that. I think it's very fair the way it's been designated, that the Auditor General does his audits, prepares his reports, and places the report in the domain of the Parliament or the Legislative Assembly, and then of course it comes into public space. I think that's adequate. The only inadequacy of the present setup is that the Auditor General's mandate is being defined in a statute which was created in 1971. Now, if you will recall, in 1971 there was no such thing as public-private partnership. It had not been considered. It had not been conceptualized. There was no such thing as the 73rd and 74th Amendment, which is Panchayati Raj institutions, urban local bodies had not been created. There was no such things as non-governmental agencies which were delivering programs like the National Rural Health Mission, etc. These had not been conceptualized. So obviously that mandate of 1971 does not automatically cover these. Yes. I think time has come when that mandate needs to be amended and to be upgraded so that huge amount of government spending, which is through the models which I just mentioned, also comes within the automatic audit mandate of the CAG.
But are you seeing any progress? Because you made this recommendation much before that the PPP and also the Panchayat Raj institutions must come under the purview of audit. Are you seeing any progress at this moment?
Yes. What had happened is that the Finance Ministry and the Planning Commission have issued executive instructions to cover these. But I think those executive instructions are not adequate. They will have to be brought under the automatic audit mandate, which will have to be with a statutory backing.
Right. Talking about corruption now, you've been a crusader against the corruption part, and India is now ranked by the Transparency International. It is around 76th globally. Earlier it was 84. There is improvement in the situation. How are you looking at the future in this space?
No, I see a lot of green shoots emerging on this, and I find there's a very healthy trend, which means people want a system of governance, a system of delivery in which there are no asides. I walk into a government office, I make my payments or I seek my facilities, and whatever is laid down by the government, I'm willing to pay for that. Why should I be harassed for that particular duty for which a government servant is obliged to deliver that thing? And I think that's been a very good and a healthy trend which is beginning. We see it in the urban areas. Hopefully it will slowly peter down to the rural areas also, and the population will come to accept that they have a right, they have an entitlement, they are empowered to demand these kind of services from government officials.
The party which formed the government in the centre as well has actually spoke about things against the corruption, and then people who have voted them to power. Now, why I mentioned this is the influence, once again I want to go back to the political influence on the civil services officials. Now that influence, which you have seen when you were the CAG or even before when you were the IAS officer in various other sectors, have you ever been under pressure, sir? A very straight question. Did you face that pressure when you were actually rendering your services?
See, I don't think it would be fair to classify the entire political establishment as being either wanting irregularities or chasing those issues which are not really theirs. There will be pressures. Right. There will be pressures because society exerts pressures of different kinds. There are people who require different kind of services. There are people who are certain insidious elements also. Yes. Yes. There are a large number of people who want to take shortcuts. They want to jump the queue. They want to get ahead by unfair means. But the job of the administration, the job of the bureaucrat is to ensure that the game is played by the rules of the game, and everybody follows that rule.
And out of your experience, what do you think when we talk about the checks and balances in the government, how exactly the money should be spent?
See, the best way is monies are collected by government. It's a parliament which votes the budget, lays down how much is to be spent on which sector, which department. Monies are spent, and then once the monies are spent, I think whether it's a public auditor or even a chartered accountant, yes, there should be full accountability of the monies being spent, and it should be put out into public domain. Right. Suppose I'm a panchayat secretary and I've been given, say, 2 crores of rupees to spend on a particular project, I should, at the end of every quarter, say that, look, I've spent 40 lakhs in this quarter, and this 40 lakhs has been spent on X and Y and Z kind of projects. Put it out on a notice board. Let it be available for everybody to see. The moment everybody gets to see it, automatically the trust gets built up, because they know, yes, it was for building a road, it was for building a primary health center, it has actually been built, it's been delivered. That's where the trust between the public and the government builds up, and that trust is the one which ensures synergies in development or implementation of programs.
If we give an option, if you have to restart as the Comptroller and Auditor General, will you have a different beginning, or will you be continuing the same?
Well, I don't think I'll have a different beginning. All that I did was, depending upon the factors that I was obtaining from at that point of time, I don't regret any of those actions, and I just keep hoping that a positive trend emerges out of all that happened. And I think, as I said earlier, I see a silver lining, and which I think is a very healthy development.
So finally, what is the message you want to give to the youngsters who want to be the civil services officer in the coming?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. And you see, today the menu of options available to a young person wanting to join any job is remarkably much more than it was, say, 45 years back when we were getting into service. Government was one of the options, and not too many other options were there. But today, I think it's a public-spirited youngster who joins government. I want to send the message that, look, the kind of opportunities that you get in government, you won't get anywhere else. But your objectives must be clear, your dedication and sincerity toward the job at hand must be total, and you must be prepared to function in an environment which seeks transparency and where you know that you are sitting in a kind of a glass cage. All your actions will be available for anybody to scrutinize all the time. And I think as long as those objectives are clear in your mind, nothing can deter you from the path of being a successful government official.
Right. So that is Mr. Vinod Rai, who actually gives a message to all the youngsters that you should be focused, dedicated, and must be clear, and you should have all those clear objectives, and then nothing can stop you and you can be successful in your career. Thank you very much, sir, for giving your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.